When I inherited my father's hunting lodge, I knew I was taking on more than just a piece of property. It was a sacred piece of our family's history, a $2 million testament to 30 years of sweat, timber, and love, nestled deep in the Appalachian woods, about 10 miles from the nearest neighbor. My dad built it with his own hands, calling it his cathedral, a place where the smell of pine and the quiet of the forest wrapped around you like a warm blanket. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was where I'd spent my childhood, learning to hunt by his side, mounting an elk head on the wall when I was just 12, our proudest moment together. Every beam held a memory, every creak of the floorboards echoed his laughter, and standing there I could almost hear his voice, steady as ever, saying, "Keep your boots clean and don't let the world push you around." That lodge, on land our family had owned since 1952, was my legacy to protect, a promise I made to him after he passed. I'd barely started settling in, fixing a broken shutter on a crisp morning, when trouble arrived in the form of Deborah Witherspoon. Folks call her Karen, the president of the Sycamore Bluff HOA. She strutted up my gravel drive in her high heels, clipboard in hand, acting like she owned the whole forest. With a plastic smile, she called my father's lodge an unauthorized structure, complaining that the untreated logs in my woodpile were an eyesore to her so-called community. I looked around at the empty hills stretching for miles, no neighbors, just squirrels and deer, and knew right then this fight was about more than rules. It was about defending everything my father had built. The trouble started the moment Deborah Witherspoon, who everyone around here calls Karen, set foot on my land, acting like she owned every inch of the Appalachian woods I'd called home for decades. As the president of the Sycamore Bluff HOA, she marched up my gravel drive, her heels clicking like a smug little metronome, clipboard in hand, and a fake smile plastered on her face. She had the audacity to call my father's hunting lodge, a $2 million masterpiece he'd built with his own hands over 30 years, an unauthorized structure. She complained that the untreated logs in my woodpile, stacked neatly about 20 feet from the lodge, were an eyesore and didn't fit her community aesthetic. I looked around at the rolling hills stretching for miles, with no neighbors in sight, just trees, squirrels, and a few stubborn deer, and I couldn't believe her nerve. My family had owned this land since 1952, long before her fancy subdivision even existed. Yet here she was, shoving a packet of HOA rules at me, talking about structure visibility and color palettes, like I should be ashamed. I didn't take her packet. "Your little handbook means nothing here," I told her, my voice steady but firm, my fists tightening around the hammer I'd been using to fix a shutter. Karen's smile cracked, but she didn't back down. She came back with fines, claiming my fire pit, about 15 feet wide and a family staple for years, was unapproved, and that the deer corn I left out for wildlife, like every farmer within 50 miles does, was a violation. It was clear she wasn't just overbearing, she was a petty tyrant, and I wasn't about to let her fake authority tear down everything my father had built. The conflict with Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the Sycamore Bluff HOA, didn't just simmer. It erupted into a full-blown war when she decided my land was her personal playground to harass and trespass on. It started the morning after our first showdown, when I found a laminated sign hammered into the bend of my gravel road, about 50 feet from my lodge, declaring "Private HOA residents only" in bold letters, as if my family's property since 1952 was suddenly hers to claim. More signs popped up along my hiking trails, some half covering the old wooden sign my dad had carved by hand. "Welcome to Fox Hollow," a sacred marker of our legacy that Karen defiled like it was scrap wood. I yanked every one of them down, snapped them across my knee, and tossed them into my fire pit, watching the flames eat her fake authority. But the next day, they were back, bigger and cleaner, stamped with her ridiculous HOA logo, as if she thought it meant something out here in the woods. 10 miles from her subdivision. Then came the fines. Crisp white envelopes stamped with her phony Sycamore Bluff letterhead, piling up in my mailbox like a bad joke. She cited me for everything: my unauthorized structure, my unapproved fire pit that had warmed our family for decades, even the deer corn I left out for wildlife. calling it negligent use of agricultural equipment, something every farmer within 50 miles does without issue. I marched to her overpriced house that night, pounding on her glass door until she answered, draped in a tacky silk robe, her plastic smile as smug as ever. I told her to stay off my land, but she just tilted her head like a vulture, claiming my property's visibility impacted her community's property values. The real breaking point came when Karen set up her niece's $200,000 wedding on my soybean field, about 100 yards from the lodge, without permission. Her guests stomped all over my crops, and when her caterer had the gall to say my tractor, parked 30 feet away, was ruining their aesthetic, I'd had enough. I fired up my John Deere manure spreaders and sprayed the whole wedding, turning her pristine setup into a stinking mess, showing her that trespassing on my land came with a price she'd never forget. The night Karen burned down my father's hunting lodge, my world turned to ash, literally. I was on patrol about 5 miles from home when my fire chief's voice crackled over the radio. "Smoke's coming off your ridge." My stomach dropped like a stone as I floored it, sirens screaming through the night, covering the 10-mile distance in record time. When I reached the clearing, the lodge, a $2 million masterpiece my dad built over 30 years, was a roaring furnace. Flames devoured everything. The porch collapsed with a groan. The chimney stood like a lonely gravestone, and the elk head Dad and I mounted when I was 12, a memory of our proudest hunt, was gone, swallowed by the fire. It wasn't a natural disaster, no storm, no lightning, just pure malice. My fire chief, Charlie, met me near the tree line, his face grim as he pointed to a gas can hidden under some brush about 20 feet from the lodge, and accelerant trails circling the perimeter. In the mud I spotted boot prints, tactical tread, size 8 or 9, too small for my crew but all too familiar. Just 2 days earlier, I'd seen Karen at the Army surplus store, 15 miles away, haggling over tactical boots and a camo jacket, calling it civic fashion. The real proof came from my hidden wildlife cameras, set up weeks ago after Karen's earlier stunts. Sitting in my cruiser, soaked in smoke and fury, I pulled up the footage. There was Karen in her camo getup, red gas can in hand, pouring fuel around the lodge's walls. She struck a match, dropped it, and watched the flames with a smug smirk before scurrying off, leaving 30 years of my family's blood, sweat, and memories to burn. After Karen burned down my father's hunting lodge, I could have let rage take over. I wanted to march straight to her pristine porch, about 3 miles away, and cuff her on the spot. But I knew justice needed to be airtight, not emotional. I had the footage from my wildlife cameras, showing her pouring gas and lighting the match that destroyed 30 years of memories. But a single arson charge wouldn't be enough. Karen would twist it, cry HOA harassment, and turn it into a circus. I needed to dismantle her entire empire, so I got to work with a plan as steady as the steel I'd later use to rebuild. First, I headed to the county records office, 15 miles from my property, and spent hours digging through HOA filings, meeting minutes, and public records. By noon, I struck gold, the Sycamore Bluff HOA charter. Karen waved around like a holy relic wasn't even notarized. Half the signatures were fake, some from dead folks, others from an old yard sale sign-up sheet my dad hosted 20 years ago. She'd written her rules in crayon, and I had the proof to show it. Next, I went door to door in Sycamore Bluff, knocking on the homes of neighbors Karen had terrorized for years. Miss Lorna, fined for a bird bath in her backyard, about 10 feet from her house, whispered in disbelief when I told her none of Karen's rules were legal. Bill threatened over Hanukkah lights on his porch, and the Johnsons, hit with unlicensed lawn ornaments for a garden gnome, shared their stories, each one worse than the last. I collected testimonies, photos of fraudulent fines, and copies of bogus warnings Karen had hand-delivered like she was the law. The dam broke at an off-the-record meeting in the old church basement, 5 miles from the subdivision, a place Karen had tried to have condemned years ago. The room was packed. Neighbors who'd cowed under her fake rules for too long were now ready to fight. I showed them the footage of Karen torching my lodge, laid out her forged documents and fabricated fines, and said, "We're going to pull her whole kingdom apart." For the first time since Karen slithered into this valley, the people weren't scared. They were pissed, and they were with me, ready to see justice served. Karen didn't slink away after burning down my father's lodge. She doubled down with desperate counterattacks, trying to spin the narrative before I could bring her down. The morning after the fire, every mailbox in Sycamore Bluff, about 3 miles from my property, received a newsletter with a grainy black and white photo of me at the gas station, mid-yawn, looking exhausted because I hadn't slept in days. The headline screamed, "Sheriff under investigation for aggressive and antisocial behavior," accusing me of harassing the HOA and endangering community harmony. It was pure fiction. Karen even claimed I was facing suspension, a lie so bold I crumpled the paper and tossed it into my fire pit, watching it burn like her credibility. Later that day, she held a mandatory emergency community meeting on the park lawn, about 2 miles from her house, complete with tables, banners, and HOA flags, flapping like she was hosting a royal event. She paraded around, clipboard high, passing out a petition to have me removed as sheriff, declaring, "The safety of Sycamore Bluff is at risk." I stood at the back, arms crossed, watching her facade crack. Her voice shook when the crowd didn't clap, and signatures came slow as neighbors whispered, sensing something wasn't right. Then 2 nights later, my cameras caught her again, just after midnight, striding through the ashes of my lodge, about 50 feet from where the porch once stood, with a clipboard-toting lackey, measuring the land like she was claiming it. She waved at me, chirping about surveying for insurance purposes and claiming the area was being annexed into the HOA proper with forged documents, a felony move that showed her panic. Karen wasn't just desperate, she was unraveling, handing me the final nail for her coffin. The day I brought Karen to justice was one Sycamore Bluff wouldn't forget, a public takedown that felt like a long overdue reckoning. I'd gathered all the evidence, footage of her arson, forged HOA documents, and testimonies from neighbors she'd bullied for years. That afternoon, Karen was hosting another of her HOA gatherings on her pristine front lawn, about 3 miles from my lodge, with folding tables, clipboards, and banners flapping like she still ruled the place. I made sure every neighbor she'd ever fined or threatened was there to witness her fall. I pulled up slow, no sirens, just my badge and a warrant, and called out, "Deborah Witherspoon, you're under arrest," loud enough for everyone within 100 yards to hear. The charges rolled off my tongue: arson, fraud, forgery, trespassing, filing false documents, and the crowd gasped as I flipped open the warrant like a guillotine blade. Karen shrieked, "This is harassment," as she backed into her tables, clipboards toppling, a banner tearing in the chaos. My deputies cuffed her, and the neighbors she'd terrorized for years erupted in applause. Miss Lorna whistled, Bill hollered, "About damn time," and someone even blasted the national anthem on a Bluetooth speaker, like it was the 4th of July. In court, the footage of Karen torching my lodge played on a loop, her smug smirk undeniable, and the judge sentenced her to 10 years probation, $1.8 million in restitution, and 5 years of community service, scrubbing park benches and bathrooms under county supervision. As she was led away, still thrashing and screaming, "You'll regret this," I stepped into her line of sight and said, "No, you will." The HOA was dissolved, her fake fines voided, and Sycamore Bluff was finally free, cheering a U-Bun. Justice that had been a long time coming. After Karen's empire crumbled, I rebuilt my father's hunting lodge, stronger than ever, about 10 miles from Sycamore Bluff. It wasn't the same. Some memories couldn't be replaced, but I made sure it was ready for anything, with steel beams, solar panels, and a fireproof design. I laid stonework around a new fire pit, about 15 feet wide, and carved a sign above the door: Fox Hollow Lodge, Karen Proof. Since 2024, a little jab that made me chuckle every time I passed under it. Sycamore Bluff threw a real party the next weekend. No HOA rules, just barbecue, kids running through sprinklers, and folks laughing freely for the first time in years. I didn't need to make a speech. Seeing them toast to freedom was enough. Karen, meanwhile, was stuck in an orange vest, scrubbing park benches 5 miles away, a public laughingstock as teens filmed her, whispering, "Isn't that the crazy HOA lady?" Most mornings I sit on my new porch, coffee in hand, watching the fog roll through the trees, feeling the peace my father always wanted. The HOA picked the wrong property, and I'd made sure justice prevailed. The story of the sheriff's battle against Karen and the Sycamore Bluff HOA offers profound lessons for us all, especially as we grow older and reflect on what truly matters. First, it reminds us to stand firm for what's ours. Whether it's a family legacy like the Sheriff's Lodge, built 10 miles from any neighbor, or the values we've held dear for decades. When faced with overreach, like Karen's fake fines and trespassing on the sheriff's 50-year-old family land, we must protect our rights with courage and wisdom, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us. Second, it shows the power of community. By uniting neighbors, from Miss Lorna to Bill, the sheriff turned victims into victors, proving that together we can overcome even the most stubborn bullies. Finally, it teaches us that justice, though slow, is worth the fight. The sheriff's patience in gathering evidence, like footage from cameras 20 feet from the lodge, ensured Karen's downfall. As seniors, let's apply this by safeguarding our legacies, supporting our neighbors, and seeking justice with integrity, ensuring our later years are filled with peace and purpose.